Hi there, I'm James Osborne, the co-founder of the Recruitment Network, and this is the TRN Podcast. Every week, we unpack the strategies, the technologies, the processes and mindsets fueling today's top-performing recruitment agencies. We take a look behind the scenes of some great recruitment businesses. We listen to the real-life stories of those who have built those businesses, and we learn from some of the industry's greatest thought leaders to help you become both future fit and future relevant. So let's begin with this next episode of the TRM Podcast. Paul Sharpe, welcome today. Paul, if you don't know Paul, I'm sure you will do, but Paul's a business coach, he's a mentor, he's an advisor, non-exec director, and as I said, he's an advisor around RPO, MSP, and that type of stuff. And he's live and direct from Amsterdam today. No bike in the corner though, Paul. You let yourself down a little bit there, but I've got my bike in here for you, especially for you. So firstly, how are you doing, Paul? You all good?
Yeah, all good. Thanks for that. And I just have to add that this isn't a picture of my father or grandfather behind me. It's actually just a random picture from the hotel room, which is where I am. So before anybody thinks I'm uber posh, I'm from the north of England and very, very grounded and down to earth.
I reckon you take that picture everywhere you go, don't you? Wherever you go, you just stick it up on the wall behind you when you're doing your
Yeah.
presentations.
Just makes me look important that I had a dad who could afford to fly.
As we're going through today, I know there'll be obviously there's a good sort of 80, 90 people on the call today. So if you've got any questions at any stage because of the size of the group, please feel free to put them in the chat or put them in the Q&A, and I'll make sure we get those answered today. Obviously, if you're listening back to this on a recorded version, feel free to send your questions through to us retrospectively. We'll make sure we get those answers for you. So, Paul, let's go sort of get straight into it. I'm going to presume everybody on the call today is an absolute muppet, has no idea what an RPO is or that type of stuff. So let's just go back to basics very, very quickly, and get the sort of the language out of the way. What do you when we talk about RPO, what do we mean exactly?
Yeah, it's always the first question I get asked is, what does RPO mean? So I default back to the staffing industry analysts, which is where I sort of learn my sort of trade around recruitment, and their definition is the one that I sort of stick by, which is RPO is perm recruitment, and MSP is contingent. And obviously, there's lots of different, abbreviations around statement of works and every other things in between. But RPO is around perm recruitment. Now, there are different types of RPO solutions. You can do, project-based RPO. You can do, talent solutions. But predominantly, RPO is perm recruitment. What I would say is that some of the things we're going to be talking about today, you can apply the same methodology to the vast majority of recruitment, whether it be perm or contingent. But for the purposes of I guess, the webinar today, we are really talking about perm recruitment under the banner of RPO.
Yeah, and that's the thing, isn't it? And I know we're going to touch on this word productization later on, which is something we've both been talking about, I think, for a long time. But there is that piece now. A lot of people have productized their services and come up with 1,001 different acronyms and different variations. It's all sort of the same thing, really, at the
It
end of the
is.
day, isn't it? And I know it's something you're really passionate about, but why?
Mm.
What is it about RPO or this type of stuff that make that you get so excited about?
Yeah, well, I've been, as you know, James, I've been in the recruitment industry a long time now. I've worked in house. I've worked for, big global agencies. I've worked for SME agencies. So I guess that experience has helped me be a little bit more holistic in terms of my outlook on the recruitment sector and the opportunities around what agencies do well and maybe could do better. But I think if you just take a step back just for a second, the market is forecasted to grow from 9 billion in 2023 to 32 billion in 8 years. So when people are talking about finding a market that is growing, and people are struggling a little bit to do that, this is a market that is going to explode. Whether it be Gartner, Polaris, these are research-based organizations which are predicting this market is going to explode. And I'll tell you the reasons why. It's fairly logical, but if you take a step back, a lot of the TA teams have been culled. There are a lot of TA people on LinkedIn looking for work. Investment in TA teams have been cut back. HRDs are really worried about the capacity of the TA teams to deal with anything beyond a very basic level of recruitment in 2025. So there's a lot of concern there in the from an organizational perspective in terms of what's going on, where the investment is, and what they can cope with and what they can't. But what I will say is this, and also, James, you're a lot older than me, so you'll remember more of these instances. But after every downturn and tight market, RPO bounces back. It's the one thing that bounces back straight away. So if people are thinking about how to grow market share or how to do more with what they've got rather than worried about all the things that they can't affect, this is one of those things you should be doing. And it's absolutely the right time to do it. And I'll give you a last bit of anecdote. When I was COO for Interquest, I had a big, long-standing relationship with an investment company, beginning with the letter I, and 15 years of a relationship, as solid a relationship as what you could possibly find. A bloke called Matt Yates came in, new head of talent. He's actually out in Amsterdam, by the way, so I'm trying to meet up with him for a beer tonight. And he came into that organisation and he wanted to change things. And before I knew it, after about 5 months, I got a call from Matt saying, just to let you know, we've outsourced all our recruitment to this particular brand, a well-known brand, and you'll be invited to be part of the PSL. I had a really uncomfortable call with Matt, and I called him something which I'm a bit ashamed about doing. But it was all about, I was like, Matt, why have you not asked me to, I could have tendered for this, I could have bid for this, I could have done this for you. And do you know what he did? He's turned around and he said, Paul, you never asked me that question, and so I assumed you couldn't do it. And I
Mm.
had to go back to the business and tell them that I'd lost this big chunk of business because I hadn't been proactive around asking customers what they wanted. And it was a real light bulb moment and one that I still sort of wear that scar quite proudly about. Because how often as recruiters do we just not ask the right questions? We're all focused on what we've got coming in here and now. We're not thinking about longer term value. So RPO is a great way to block out the competition, ask the right questions, and get longevity in your customer relationship because you're adding value rather than just providing a service. And that's why I feel really passionate about this.
Yeah, this was a big debate we had last week actually with a couple of people over in these are actually guys over in Italy, and we were talking about the shift, I suppose, from a recruiter being a almost like a transactional order taker into more of a consultant and an advisor, which begs two questions. I mean, number one, obviously that is a shift, and it's the right shift, and we've always talked about it. That's why our job titles are recruitment consultants as opposed to recruitment order takers, type of thing.
Yeah.
But actually that would be spelled ROT, which is rot. That would be very good anyway. But the second piece with it is, and the big question at the moment we're talking about is that do we have the skill sets within our businesses for people to be able to ask those questions, for people to be able to go and win RPO type business? And I'm not convinced, I'm not saying this is a bad thing about any of the people working in the industry, but I don't think we've trained our recruiters yet to be able to have these conversations and everything else. So it's easier just to go out, pick up a job, walk away with the job, stick it back in the office, as opposed to going out there and challenging and talking about workforce planning and so on and so forth, I think. So there's definitely a question mark around that piece as well, right?
Yeah, 100%. And I think that extends to business owners sometimes as well, James.
Sure.
We've gone from being a recruiter to running a business, and how much formal training do we have once we get there as business owners? I don't think we do.
Yeah.
So I think that skills gap goes right throughout the business for me.
You talked about that this is on the agenda now, or RPO is on the agenda for over three-quarters of the agency owners of the industry. Well, where's that stat come from, and why is that now why is it now suddenly sort of rearing its head more than ever before?
Yeah, we have a business health check, James, where people, ask various questions around the state of their recruitment agency and it benchmarks it.
Mm.
So we know from well over 100 business owners that this is something that's on the agenda. But what I would say is that while 76% of business owners are looking at this, I actually think it's a fraction of that are actually getting on with it and doing it.
Yeah, yeah,
So maybe this is where the bike comes in handy. Just get on the bike and cycle to wherever you're trying to get to. But I think what most of us agree with is that 2024 was a fairly tough year. I think 2025 is going to be roughly the same, maybe a little bit better, hopefully. But there are things that we are with things that are in our control. And what I can say is that, and you will probably know this as well, James. Typically recruiters lose between 40 and 50% of their customers every year. So customer retention is a really, really big issue. We on average fill 30% of the vacancies that we're given. So we're working for 70% of the time free of charge. when customers say, why do you charge 18%? We charge 18% because we have to charge 18% to make up for all the waste that we start working on roles that we don't get paid for. So there's some really, really big challenges in the recruitment industry that I think business owners are starting to wake up to now and realize. Hence why, retainers and embedded talent solutions, these are all things that are firmly on the agenda of business owners right now. But I think over and above all that, and you touched upon it, it's about how you drive meaningful relationships. I think the minute you can provide a service which is, about fixing a problem, the level of conversation goes from there to there, and the level of stakeholder relationship tends to go from there to there. When you look at a lot of businesses, a lot of the relationships are with TA people, maybe TA business partners, sometimes administrators, sometimes it's through portals. We've been talking about this forever, but we have to now start to fight back. But the reason why we can't and sometimes struggle to get time at a senior level is because we haven't got anything to say other than, and this comes back to your training, we haven't got anything to say other than, have you got any orders? We're not talking about thought leadership. We're not talking about the world of work in 10 years' time. We're not talking about how technology is going to shape their competitive landscape and what they need to be thinking about. So we're moving away from being consultants and we're just becoming order takers. We absolutely have to flip this round. RPO is a great way to get paid for the work that you do, because you do get paid for the work. It's a great way to drive the enterprise value from a recruitment business perspective from, multiplier of say two to maybe six, maybe eight. So you're increasing the value of your business. You're having better relationships. And the last thing I'd just add is this is really interesting work for some of your people. So everybody's winning in this process. But I
Yeah.
go back to your stat at the start. A lot of people are looking at this, but a lot of people are then going, that's too hard, or I've got, a bit of an inferiority complex about this because only the big recruiters can do it. And it's absolute rubbish. We've had agencies with a small headcount as 7 do this, right up to 130. The guys that we're with tomorrow is a headcount of 3. Any recruiter can do this. And the last thing I'd just add is I still do a bit of work for TA businesses, so organizations direct. 2 years ago, I sat opposite the world's top 6 RPO providers and judged and viewed and scored their offering for an organization. There is not one thing those guys do that a recruiter can't do.
Yeah.
Yes, they are polished. Yes, they know really well how to position things and talk and convey the future and paint a beautiful picture. They're really good salespeople, by the way. But from a delivery perspective, there's nothing they do that any recruiter can't do.
Really interesting. And you're absolutely right. And your passion really comes across, Paul, by the way. I mean, and I think that this is a really important thing. We're not just talking about this because it sounds like a new thing to play with. It's actually,
No.
we passionately believe this makes a difference. I caught up with, it was really fun actually. I caught up with one of my biggest competitors that I used to have when I was a recruiter, going back many years ago now. And she's now one of the vice presidents of Manpower. And we bidded together, we pitched together against each other to try and win the Hewlett Packard contract over in Australia.
Yeah.
I won it. Let me make it really clear. So thumbs up for that one. So we got it, and it was an amazing contract. It was brilliant. But the interesting thing is when we discussed about the pricing structure behind it, and this was an RPO of sorts. When we discussed the pricing structure, we benchmarked all of our pricing structure on very, very different metrics than we were used to. One of which being net contribution. And I don't think enough recruitment companies measure their business, their client base, their job flow, everything on net contribution, because that is the stuff, that's the real sanity metrics over the vanity metric more than anything else. So for me, I think it's really important to understand that. And one of the things I wanted to touch on was around these metrics, which are a little bit different because a recruitment company today, you take a step back, what do we measure our business on? We measure our companies now more like a SaaS tech firm. We measure things like customer lifetime value, cost of acquisition cost, etc. If you can compare an RPO customer against CLV and customer acquisition cost against a classic contingent customer, they are chalk and cheese. I mean, it's just completely different world. And it's almost like two recruitment companies doing the same thing, but just getting very, very different results off the back of it.
Yeah, 100%. I think this comes back to, we were talking earlier, just in terms of people understanding what they need to consider and why. And I think, this is around not only why do they want to do this, but, are they actually ready for doing it at the same time? And your business metrics are key. And when people say to me, I'm looking at an RPO solution, do you think I can do it? I can't make that judgment without understanding, the business and the business metrics. But I'm still surprised today that people aren't measuring basic things like how much your GP you convert into your operating profit. We know the average in the UK is 18%. We know through deploying RPO solutions, you should be able to double that to 36%, even 40%. When we talk about, customer retention rate, is customer retention one of the key business metrics? It absolutely should. I look at people's, relationship with the customers. When did they last have a service review with their top three customers? We know 32% of recruiters haven't sat down face to face with their top three customers in the last 2 years. That is outstanding, and not outstanding in a good way, by the way. So,
And similar to that, a lot of those customers, they don't know what their total top customer
no,
spend is. So you
no,
may have 6% market share. You may have
yeah,
they may be bidding X with you, but you don't know what market share you've got to go
yeah.
after. So you could be leaving so much on the table with this.
Yeah, 100%. And I hate the word search review, by the way, because I just think it's a horrible, vile word because it's normally recruiters turning up talking about all the things they've done for that customer. That is bollocks. You should be talking about thought leadership, what's happening. This is your time with the customer. If you leave that session and you're not memorable, you've failed in my view. And if you're just going to turn up and talk about all the things you've done, you will probably achieve that.
Yeah.
Absolutely. You've got to be memorable when you leave a customer's meeting.
Yeah, and that theme should follow through everything you do, from your social media outreach to everything else in between. So I totally agree with that 100%. Okay,
Yeah.
so let's look at this now. Let's presume we've got people on this call who are going, all right, this sounds pretty cool. You guys seem pretty pumped and excited by this RPO thing. I'm going to give it a bit of a go. When we refer to, I suppose, what happens next. So what does a recruitment business need to consider first? And let's lead into that sort of next part to that is basically, so where do they start? What do
Yeah.
they do?
Yeah, so it's got to start off with customers. So I'm a massive fan of segmenting your customer base. I was chatting to a business owner last week who'd segmented his business, and when I segmented his customer base, and when I went into the detail, he'd done it by sector. And honestly, I had that sort of face palm moment when I was like, I was doing that 20 years ago. Is that, really sophisticated as what we are now as recruiters? So customer segmentation to me is a three-pronged process. You look at your customers from 2024, you map out what you get from them based around the fee, the recurring revenue opportunities, being in your swim lane, access to line managers, regular roles on an exclusive basis, right down to you one of five on a PSL and you get ad hoc vacancies. So mapping out your customers according to what you get from your relationship is really important. Criteria number one. That is criteria number one. The second one is about where your relationship's at. So I've got five buckets. It starts at contact, acceptance, trust, advocacy, and loyalty. Loyalty and advocacy. So then mapping out your customer relationships by what type of relationship you've got. And that's super important. And I'm going to come back to this because this is the reason why we start with segmentation. And then the last piece of criteria is based around the Boston Matrix. So I'm a big fan of four-box models. So it's where the customer's going. So not only what are you getting back from your time, what type of relationship have you got, but where is the customer going in the future? So you want to be in high growth markets, hopefully. So using your customer list, mapping it out against those three bits of criteria, you end up with a massive wall with everything segmented, and it's your starting point. But regardless of whether you do RPO, you should be segmenting your customer base every year. This is basic account management techniques. And it's something that I used to do. I was at the coalface up until 4 years ago, by the way, of recruitment. So, I've not been an independent advisor for, as long as a lot of people out there. This is something that I would religiously do, is segmenting the customer base. So you've got a really clear plan for the year ahead, and then potentially owners of each, account and responsibility in terms of what you're trying to achieve. So segmenting it is the starting point.
Okay, so you've got your data, you've done your segmentation. What do you do next?
Brilliant. So you start now building your minimum value product offering. So this is about trying to build out your service proposition. Again, it can start with things from a strategic perspective, how you help the customer source, how you help them attract, how you help them assess, and how you help them on board. So again, sort of five different buckets there. I'll give you a few examples just to be specific. So people might say to me, I've done some work around talent mapping. It's a fairly common one. So what does talent mapping look like? How do you use that with your customers? Sometimes it's been used with one or two customers, sometimes it's a little bit more. But what is the service that we think a customer might value and ultimately might pay for? So before the requisitions even started, what does a customer want? What do they value? What would help them? What guides them? What informs them? What do we do? What could we do? What's the art of the possible? And just break all the items down. So these are features of a service and strategy that you are trying to articulate so that you understand what the service proposition might look like. Then you move on to attraction, then on to sourcing, then onto selection, then onto onboarding. So you're trying to break down all the features that you think your customers would value, and that, in a nutshell, is your minimum value product offering.
Yeah.
That's your starting point for your MVP. But what I would just add is the object here, and this is where recruiters can sometimes struggle from a mindset perspective. One of the overarching bits you've got to achieve is driving internal mobility, referrals, direct hires from the organization, and reducing agency dependency.
Mhm.
So, as an objective, if your product offering doesn't achieve that or go some way to achieving a chunk of it, it's probably not right. And this is where sometimes recruiters struggle because they're thinking, but I charge 18% and I get 5 placements a year. It's like, yeah, but this is completely different. You've got to ditch your recruiter hat, work as if you're in-house internal, and think if I was a consultant for one of the big consultancy firms and they were looking to outsource, would it achieve what I think they need to achieve? And that's the
Yeah.
work that I do with organizations sometimes, is helping them trying to achieve what they want to achieve. I've got to, when I do that, I have to take my recruiter hat off, otherwise it blinkers my thinking.
It's really interesting because you talk about being at the coalface. One of the ways that I love to remain at the coalface is I often get asked to go on pitches with members, which I really, really love because it basically means, I think I'm reasonably okay at it. So it's quite nice to get back out there and actually
Yeah,
experience what it's like to stand in front of a customer and handle objections and do the pitch and everything else,
yeah,
which I think is hugely important. I remember one pitch that we won, and it was about 18 months ago. It was a really cool pitch that we did. It was brilliant. I mean, and it was a really nice, it was about a $3 million a year contract, which was great. And I remember pitching with the customer, and we actually, to your point, we actually had a very, very different pricing metric. And it was based on the placements that we did, we basically got paid less for.
yeah,
And we got paid more for the direct hires and the referrals that we generated for the clients instead. So you think about that. So basically, we made more money out of helping the client become more independent from us.
yeah,
But the margin on that is obviously significantly higher because we're doing
yeah,
less work to deliver on it. So that is an absolute win-win-win solution all the way around.
yeah, yeah,
And it doesn't mean you're going to lose the client there for an 18 months time because you've done such a good job, they're going to bugger off and not need you anymore. It never happens like that.
yeah,
If anything, you become more embedded and more in it. You
yeah,
touched on a point which I think is really important here, though, and this is where I've seen so many recruitment companies and recruiters go wrong when it comes to playing. I'm going to use the word playing with the RPO models and everything else. When they're mapping out the services and all the bits within the service, what I've seen happen is a lot of the things that people are adding into this service matrix are completely pointless things. They just look quite pretty, and it fills up a page and that type of stuff.
yeah,
And I think you'll probably agree with me. I hope you agree with me on this, Paul. But for me, if you're gonna build a service offering, everything in that service offering must add significant value to the customer and must solve a problem or a pain point or an issue that they're facing, or create a more of an opportunity for them. It can't just be a nice, prettied up version of something that you already do that doesn't really do anything differently. Would that be a reasonable thing to say?
It's 100% right. And ultimately, cost is has become the biggest factor for outsourcing now. 2 years ago, cost was third or fourth on the list. It was about, quality and time to hire. So cost is becoming a big driver now. And I think where agencies struggle a little bit when they're building out that minimal viable product offering is to think about, how can you help add value? How can you help the organization reduce cost? Um, the last bit I just add is sometimes it's not just about cost. The work that I did with this global engineering company 2 years ago was about actually reducing the time to hire because 1,600 of their employees were on day rates, €1,000 a day, and
Yeah.
it was taking 72 days, and I thought they could get it down to 59. So, part of the business case for change was around cost reduction, but it was also about revenue realization as well. And sometimes we forget that, especially if you're in, sectors like IT, when you're providing skills into businesses that are sometimes got service contracts with customers. So sometimes you've just got to think about the positive impact you can have by achieving some other things other than just cost, but cost is still one of the top ones.
Yeah, 100%. And I think you're absolutely right. I always put it down to I never talk about cost. I always talk about return on investment. I see these things. Working with a recruitment company is an investment for a company. You're investing to get a return.
Mm.
And I'm not always convinced. I think we always used, I'm not saying you, but I think generally as an industry, we use this thing of it's all about cost. They want to be cheaper or whatever. It's not about getting cheaper. They want a better return on investment. And when
Yeah.
you start factoring in all the things that does, so you talk about speed of hire or retention rates, or and how quickly when you hire someone, how quickly do they hit a level of performance? All these things are measurements that drive a value.
Yeah.
And so we need to be talking about all of these things. So when it comes to, and Chris, I think you asked this on one of the questions in the chat about how do you measure net contribution? We need to look at all the things that impact
Mm.
the productivity, profitability, contribution of a relationship, not just the upfront cost. And therefore, well, last year it cost me £500,000. This year I want it down to £450,000. Okay, but if it's going to cost you £450,000 for this contract, but you're not going to get an increased return on investment from retention rates, cost of etc. etc., then that's a completely bloody pointless metric to have. And as a customer, you're getting this completely wrong. So we have to educate our customers better. Helen touched on this, and thank you, Helen, for your point. Meeting clients initially to understand their pain points will obviously help shape this service proposition. I think it'd be fair to say it's pretty bloody hard to do an RPO offering to a customer if you haven't even met them and haven't sat down with them. And
Yeah.
we talk a lot about you can't meet them in the meeting room. You've got to meet them in the boardroom. Two
Yeah.
very different conversations. And I think that this is key, isn't it? And this goes back into that consultative selling. You've got to get out in front of your customers to have a meaningful conversation, to analyze, challenge, and then on the back of that, produce something which is really going to hit the mark.
Yeah, well, 100%, which comes back to that segmentation exercise. Sometimes, James, I'll do that segmentation or exercise with agencies. It normally takes a good half a day, three-quarters of a day, and you look at the wall and you say, for the next 12 months, you don't need any external support. You just need to sort out, the fact that
Yeah.
you haven't got enough relationships in that top upper quartile. Because if you haven't, the chances of taking a new product to your customers is going to be really slim.
Yeah.
And the reason why we do that is because, and I'm quoting really old stuff here, but it is obvious that it's easier to sell to an existing customer than a brand new one. When you're launching a brand new product offering, it is really hard selling a talent service. I had this at Interquest because people know your brand as being a contingent recruiter, and then you're starting to talk about, RPO talent solutions, and they're a bit like, but you're a recruiter.
Mhm.
So, you know, positioning your brand, understanding your opportunities, understanding what you've got ahead of you, whether the timing is right now or whether you just need to take a step back. This is all about making sure you spend time on the right things in the right way, in the right order. Otherwise, you can burn a lot of time doing these things and you get bugger all back from it. And that, nobody wants that.
Yeah, no, absolutely spot on. Okay, us move this forward now. So we've done our mapping. We've got our big wall thing out with all your nice four quadrants, etc. You started to map out your service offering, etc. How do you? So you basically mapped it out. You built it. How do you know that what you've now built is going to work? How do you know that people are going to buy it, are going to want to buy it?
Well, here's a really good tip. So less than 15% of recruitment agency owners innovate with their customers. Less than 15%. I struggle sometimes to think of another market where you launch a new product and you don't do your customer testing first. I
Mhm.
really struggle. So and maybe in the recruitment world, James, this comes back to, the first agency was set up in 1653 in the UK, and we're still selling the same flipping service, right? So why are we not innovating with customers? And I think some of it comes down to the fact that we don't get airtime with them. We don't get airtime because they think we're just going to ask for a vacancy or an order. We're not helping them solve a problem. But if you can just get in front of your customer existing customer and do some innovation with them, you're in the top 15% of all recruiters out there. So straight away, you're starting to differentiate yourselves and have a different type of relationship with your customer. And what I mean by that is once you've got your product offering, your features, I would then advise people to take it through a beta testing process, go back to your customer segmentation wall, think about those customers in that, and I'm visualizing it here, it's the top six boxes where you'd end up, and you go testing the product with those customers. And we use a process called Kano, Kano. Kano was a Japanese guy, Six Sigma expert around Net Promoter Scores, and he built this process out, which is about taking your product offering to your customers in a very formal way. You need at least 20, ideal 30 customers to take this product offering to. And you ask them functional and dysfunctional questions. Because if you put me in a sweetie shop and say, Paul, what sweets do you want? I'll just say all of them because I just like sweets, right? But if you then say, but if we take the strawberry cream away, how will you feel? I'll go, that's a game changer. But then if they say, if we take the coffee cream away, what do you feel? I'll go, I can probably live without it. So we're trying to home in and home down on what aspects of the features that we've built out our customers can't live without, need, it's got the wow factor, it's got the impact, the wow factor, or they're just a bit about it. So you
Yeah.
take this product offering out to your customers, you've got your 20, 30 customers because you've done your segmentation, you're running it through a process, it takes about an hour, by the way, to do this. And you engaging with your customers. I'll just leave you with this thought, and I'm sure you've had this. I get approached probably once a month, and people will approach me and say, Paul, I love what you're doing on LinkedIn. I love what you say about RPO. I love your passion, all the rest of it. I've got a new product offering. Would you spare me 40 minutes of your time over a virtual coffee and I can just pick your brains and test it with you? Somebody's a thought leader, an industry expert. I'd really value your time. Now, I'm sat there reading this email going, oh, I'm a thought leader, industry expert. I quite like this. Of course, I'll give you 30 to 40 minutes of my time. Customers love this. We had this up in the northeast of England recently with an agency. She went out to her customers, and the HR director said, in all her 18 years of being a HR director, not once has she been approached by a recruiter to innovate with them because we just don't do it. And so
Yeah.
suddenly that relationship is now in a different place because we're beta testing the product offering with our customers. We're asking them what they think. We're looking at the feedback. We're running it through a process so it's objective and not subjective. And then we're refining the product offering before we take it to market. But here's the golden goose, right? Normally, when you run through that process, this isn't the objective, but normally what happens is you'll find a customer that will say, I'm actually really interested in that. And if you do launch it, will you let me know? And so straight away, you've got a business opportunity. It's not your purpose. Your purpose is genuinely to get feedback, but it's unusual not to find one or two opportunities when you're going through that you then go back to once your product offering is refined and ready to go to market.
We launched a product called Recruitment by Design, trademark symbol. Didn't need a trademark symbol; it made it sound more important. And basically, it came off the back, and it's absolutely brilliant. If anybody wants a copy of it, but I've still got the original sort of deck that we use, so I'm happy to share it with anyone on the call. But this originally came about. We were going to pitch. We're doing one of those beauty parades. This is as a recruiter, and we were doing a beauty parade for I think it was Canon. Remember Canon photocopiers,
Yeah,
all those
yeah.
sort of printers and that sort of stuff, and a big business over in Australia. And we went to this beauty parade. There were 6 agencies, and we were literally all sitting in the waiting room one by one to go in and do your proposal, pitch, that sort of stuff. And I was so infuriated that I'd been put in this room with 5 other agencies and it's all like a beauty parade. And that sort of stuff. I thought it was a load of rubbish. This. So I walked into the meeting, and I was like, it was number 4 or something, and they've all done their big PowerPoints and their presentations, blah blah blah. And I sat down with them and I said, right, I'm going to walk you through my presentation. Can you walk through your presentation? And I opened up a blank piece of paper and I put it in front of them. I said, that's my presentation. We're going to build something together right here, right now. And we won the contract. It was brilliant. We've got a really good thing. But we built this thing called Recruitment by Design, where we literally said, these are all the things that we do and can do and should do. Let's talk about which ones you actually want. And almost like, let's stick them all together and I'll give you a pricing on that and we can work out how we're going to deliver it for you. And it was such a good conversation. We won the contract, $1 million contract, wherever it was. But born out of that was this recruitment by design concept.
Yeah.
And again, I love this idea of walking into a customer saying, let's build something together rather than here's something I've got. Do you want it? Doesn't quite work. All right, well, whatever sort of stuff. So let's presume we've mapped out our product offering, we've tested it, we've got something we feel is pretty damn good. We now need to go to market. So what's your strategy about how do you take it to market? How do you go and start selling this stuff? And presumably this is a mixture between selling it to your existing customers and obviously to new customers as well, slightly different tactic.
Yeah, 100%. So you start with your existing customers, as I mentioned earlier. You've got between a 70 and 85% chance of selling it to your existing customer rather than a new customer. I think you've got less than a 10% chance of selling it to a new customer. That's not to say you might not be right place, right time. Katie's got a business in Lancashire, a very small recruitment company. She met a business owner at an event, a conference where she spoke, and the business owner approached her and said, I'm interested in, maybe doing some work together. And then, I did some work with Katie just in terms of getting that over the line, embedding it, and she's now got a £250,000 piece of business per year, 3-year contract from a new customer. So it can happen, but my experience tells me the odds of it are fairly slim. So, based on being somebody who's fairly risk adverse, I always go where the probability is a lot higher. So you go looking in your existing customers. What I would say at this point, so I do get asked this question, is what happens if you've got an existing relationship with a consultant and you're going in there pitching an RPO business? Does it take all the work away from a consultant? The reality is, in some cases, that can happen. But what I would say is that one of the biggest blockers that agencies sometimes face is the internal politics about where relationships sit and whose revenue goes on what P&L. So that can be something that you need to unpick early doors if you think that's going to be an issue. We did some work with an agency out in Ireland. They had a similar issue, but the consultant ended up being the talent acquisition business partner for the customer. So they just, their role changed from being a recruiter to being a TA person, and they almost went in-house to that customer. So there's loads of different options, but that can sometimes be a stickler. When I was at when I was CEO at Interquest, we did face those internal challenges quite a bit. And in some cases, it was easy then to just go through my existing relationships and bring in new business, which is what I was doing at the same time as well. So I'm just sort of flushing it out there.
Yeah, I think it's a valid point. I don't actually think that's an issue. And I know obviously it feels like an issue for a lot of people when they first face it. But we've done a hell of a lot of work and I think in the last couple of years about realigning and rebuilding commission structures and that type of stuff.
Yeah.
A lot of this is what that links to.
Yeah.
And actually, the reality is doing something like this is the perfect chance to realign your commission structures anyway,
100%.
and building out a proper house account strategy where actually, again, the net contribution is significantly higher than it would be otherwise. So I think it's an opportunity for recruiters, and again, you can position it accordingly. I think so. I'm sort of cool with that.
Sorry, the last point I just add, James, is we talked about your existing customers, and I know you're passionate about this because I've seen you post about it as well. But it's equally going back over the last 2, 3, 4 years where you've had existing customer relationships, but those have dropped off. On the basis that we lose 50% of our customer relationships, you've still got some warm relationships where you've engaged with people in the past. So you go back to those people as well, and then you're into your cold, your go to market, you're building out your your presence, your content, you're targeting people, sending out referrals, case studies. What I would say is once you get one over the line, honestly, everything else from there on in is just it's straightforward. It's the mindset and the shift to just getting your first one over the line. So a lot of the work that I do with people, they need some help with the first opportunity, but after that, they don't need me because it's people getting imposter syndrome about this because they think it's just for your Corn Ferries, your Manpowers, your Alexander Manns. It's absolutely not. So sometimes it's just a confidence thing. But looking at those existing, warmish, and then you're cold, and having a go-to-market strategy for each one of those buckets, I think is quite important.
Yeah, and that's why a lot of people talk about RPO light, which is basically it's RPO, but in our world, because we're a smaller business, nothing wrong with that. It's fine. And then you can call it whatever you like to call it. We've got one of the members, I think he's just done about 900 grand's worth of business in RPO business, and they're a one-man band or one-person business,
nice.
which is brilliant. And they just outsource everything else and delivery on it. So you can be any size to do this. It doesn't matter whatsoever. I think a lot of people think the RPO model is the old traditional one, which is I'm going to put a load of bodies inside the client's offices every day. It's not like that anymore, and it doesn't need to be like that whatsoever. So I'm conscious of time, Paul. I want to get to sort of there's a meaty part around this, and again, this again, there's lots of options around this, but let's talk about the pricing model around RPO, because there are different models. The model, we'll go into yours first. So how do you typically, or how do you see people pricing this, and what are the maybe the different ways that you can monetize RPO? Because there's more than one way of doing it, right?
Yeah. Well, this is where I'm going to stand on my soapbox, because I get so many calls from people saying, I've got an opportunity. We normally charge 18%. We're going to get exclusivity. I'm thinking of charging 15%. What do you think, Paul? And I just said, that's a load of bollocks. That is absolutely the worst comment I've ever heard in my entire life, because that is not how you price things up.
Mhm.
So take a step back first. You've got to understand, coming back to your point, James, what's the customer's problems? What is their issue? How are you going to add value? So doing a full discovery audit is absolutely one of the key things to do first. Because if you're not doing that discovery audit, you don't really understand the problem that you're trying to solve. And the second thing I just add is, if you do a really thorough discovery audit, you will be able to complete the business case for your customer, because you'll be comparing an apple with an apple rather than an
Yeah.
apple and a pear. So, this working out the cost per hire based around, some clever metrics and some information is really important. Otherwise, you're going to be doing what you're doing, which is saying we normally charge 18%, we're getting exclusivity, we're going to charge 16. And the last bit I'm going to add, the reason why we don't do this is, I said at the start that in contingent recruitment, the vast majority of owners convert 18% of the top, the GP at the top, to the bottom line, to the operating profit. This is your opportunity to make 36 stroke 40% profit. And the way that you do this is bottom up, not top down. This is the simplest tip in the world, bar none. And what do I mean by that? You work out your cost of delivery. And you can work out your cost of delivery because you understand what you're on the hook for from a service perspective, because you've done your discovery audit properly. And once you've done that and you've laid up all your costs in terms of desk charges, any legal fees for a new contract, the business owner's time, your commission, who's going to be filling the roles, what does service review look like, any tech involved. So you're working out the full cost of the service, and then you're putting your 36%, 40% on top. And that's how you're going to convert more from the top to the bottom line. It's the way I was taught when I worked for a deco. So this is about pricing things up properly, but it's about pricing it up bottom up, not top down. And that's how you make more money.
Yeah, so I've never wanted to agree with you more than I do now, Paul, and you're absolutely spot on with that. You really, really are. Our industry has always been built around go into a customer, what margin they paying, let's see if we can slip it down by 2 or 3%, and then we go, let's figure if we can make some money out of the bottom of that. And it's always the other way around. You start at what is the net contribution we're trying to create, and
Yeah.
then you basically build a product and a service offering and a pricing structure that allows you to create that. So absolutely spot on with that. I think it's spot on. There was a question from Stephen. I'll answer this. I'm sure you'll probably agree with this. Basically, so if a customer's only hiring 30 to 40 people a year, is an RPO still worth it? My answer would be 100% yes, it is. I think that's actually in a sweet spot for a good RPO. I think Paul, but I'm judging you agreeing with that one, which is good. So yeah, Paul, I'm just conscious of time. I want to close off on this last piece now. The one of the things that we were chatting a lot about in Cape Town last week was around the growth, this very aggressive growth of platforms and tech platforms, and how technology is really infiltrating our industry, good, bad, and ugly, and everything else in between. And I think this is hugely exciting. I've never been more excited about our industry than I am at the moment. Just the role of technology, the role, I mean, we have to include AI in that, obviously, but the role of tech and AI and automation, etc., in this, what should we be thinking about, or what should a recruitment company owner be thinking about right now?
So I still speak to a lot of HR directors and heads of TA, and I think this is commonly one of the top three questions they want to see from their recruiters. So we talked about service reviews, right? This is one area where, as a recruiter, you can turn up to your customer and start to advise and guide in terms of what's happening, things they should be looking at, things they should be embracing, how to use it. What can you do in terms of offering some training around that? What you'd recommend, what you suggest. I think there's a couple of things. From what customers value, they want help from their recruitment business partners, agencies, around tech. They're struggling to keep up to date with it more than anybody else. And the last thing I'd just add from an RPO perspective is you will struggle to deliver an RPO service without some form of technology. And by that, I'm specifically talking either applicant tracking system, ATS, or a CRM, or both. Again, you need to understand what the problem is for the customer before you can advise on tech. But there's so much tech out there that you can deploy in nanoseconds. When I started out, 20 odd years ago, there was a sort of 3 to 4 month implementation period. Now you can do these things in hours.
Yeah.
So it's about once you've done that discovery audit, you will then know what type of tech, if any, is needed by the customer. But what I would say, the vast majority of recruitment agency owners target SMEs businesses, not the Canons, the Hewlett Packards, because they tend to be swamped now by some of the big RPO providers. If you've got a customer that hasn't got an ATS system in place, this is a great opportunity for you to roll that into your service, build the cost in, so you make sure you're making the conversion of money, but it means the stickiness with the customer intensifies even more because the talent pool you've talked about creating doesn't sit on Bullhorn or Vincere because that's your talent pool. It's not their talent pool. This is you building out a talent pool on a piece of kit that they can only access through your agreement with you. It's a great way to create stickiness with your customer, but you will struggle to do a true RPO solution without some form of tech. But don't miss out on the opportunity before that to advise your customer on tech in terms of the world of stuff. So I'd watch you very closely, James, if you're going to be releasing stuff into the ether around, the World Economic Forum in terms of some of the stuff you've learned and seen and witnessed, because I would want to be relaying some of that content onto my customers.
Yeah, fantastic. Listen, Paul, we try and keep these to 45 minutes, and I know, I think you and I could probably chat for hours and hours and hours about this, and I think it's a really, really interesting time. I don't think this is the only thing recruitment companies should be doing. So I don't want everyone to wake up tomorrow and go, right, scrap my business, I'm going to be an RPO provider 100%. But I think, if you could sit back and set yourself some metrics and some targets around over the course of the next 6 to 12 months, can I go from maybe being 0 RPO to maybe 40% of my GP or even better, 40% of my net contributions coming from that? Then I think that's a sensible approach to take and test the market, test your audience and so on and so forth. So I think that's really, really, really worthwhile. I think ultimately, if I was to summarize all of this, you wake up in the morning tomorrow, the industry is evolving at a fast neck pace. I think we've heard to say tech and AI is driving that to an extent, but also talent shortages are driving that. We've got a massive issue around talent shortages that's not going away anytime soon. Doing recruitment properly will enable you to help solve that with your customers, and doing recruitment on a contingent basis, very spot type business, you can't really do your job properly as far as I'm concerned, because you can't offer all the services and products that your customers need for you to be able to solve the bloody problems of why they're talking to you in the first place. So ultimately, if you want to do your job properly, if you want to get paid for your time, paid for your worth, if you want to work in a growing marketplace, as Paul mentioned before, that's still on growth and will continue to grow, and ultimately, if you want to get higher net contribution, return on investment for your efforts, then I can't help thinking this is a really sensible approach to start with. Whether you call it RPO, RPO light, whether you call it whatever you want to call it, doesn't really matter. It's the principles, I think, are the same. Paul, really, really appreciate your time today, as always. Thank you very much, Dean. I think we'll probably catch up and do more of these because there's a lot more we can get into the meat on all this type of stuff. So enjoy the rest of your time in Amsterdam. Have a good look around.
Thank you.
Get on your bicycle and all that sort of good stuff. But really, 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 as always, appreciate your inputs. And I think you've got a great angle at this. And I think it's absolutely spot on. I think your passion really comes over on that as well in particular. So
Thank you.
thank you to everyone who's joined us today live. Really good to see you. Thank you for those who are listening back to this, the recorded version. Anything we've talked about today, if you need anything, if you want anything, just reach out to us. I know Paul's similar to us, very happy to help. And we just want to make this work for our industry. And I think this is a good opportunity to do so. Other than that, have a fantastic rest of the week. A couple of days left before it's Easter. Great opportunity to go and win some RPO business. Take care, everyone. Thanks so much. And that's a wrap for this episode of the TRN podcast. Thank you for listening. And make sure you grab the free episode toolkit. All the links are in the description. And click follow in your podcast app so you can get notified of our next episode. If you want to get more out of your business and your people, then please unlock 30 days from our platform, TRN World, for free. And help yourself to all our training content, our guides, our templates, and peer insights. You can get started at trnworld.com/trial. And finally, if you found this episode of the TRN podcast of use, please share it with your network and tag TRN on any socials with your takeaways. Otherwise, message us directly if we can help in any way. We do reply to every question. Otherwise, we'll see you next week on the next TRN podcast.